Alright, let's talk more standard, shall we? So basically, I'm not gonna tell you the exact composition from the playoff of the last US Nationals and also the Star City Games Classic event from the past weekend. But basically, I'm gonna tell you about the whole picture once again with the examples of tech cards. So, what each archetype or each strategy has against each other. And let's start by mentioning that basically you have technically four strategies defined by specific cards in the format. First, you have basically disallowed decks or supreme mode decks, so all your blue control decks. That includes blue black control and blue white control mainly, with a few variations. Then we have basically green mid range decks that are defined more like by energy package, but then again, there are also other mid-range stacks. Here I'm also talking about Timur Energy and Sultai Energy, I should say, but not the aggressive red decks, which are another part of the spectrum. And Precedent is just a sideboard card, but you're not gonna play it in Timur or mid-range decks. It's more for hyper-aggressive strategies. Then you have token decks highlighted by the Anointed Priest, all the life gain it provides to survive till your crazy late game. And to an extent, you also have the gift decks, but they're very close to token decks because they're essentially both like mid-range archetypes doing things in a slightly different manner, but they're very similar in playstyle. So I should say they're basically representing both the same part of the spectrum for the metagame. Then let's look first at the control tools. First we have Gleamsleeve Siphoner out of not only Sultai Energy, where it's just the main deck staple, but this is a card that basically wrecks and shines against blue-white control when you're piloting blue-black. At this moment, I don't really know how blue-white approach is supposed to address this issue after sideboard, because it is a really problematic creature in post-cyber games. And I've seen Archfiend in some blue blacks and to an extent in some other mid-range decks. Well, in mid-range decks, I mean. I suppose it's mainly against Monrad because that's where this trigger actually will matter the most. But I bet it also does things against tokens as well. So yeah, I suggest to have a closer look to Archfiend once again. And okay, this allows attack cards in a way because you have it in blue white against blue black, because you really want hard counters in that matchup. In negate is kind of tricky because it doesn't actually allow you to counter Hulks and Scarab Goods, so that's the thing. So what it means is that you probably want to squeeze in some copies of Disallow in your 75 in blue white so that you can somewhat improve your blue black matchup, even though it's not the most crucial component, but it certainly should help. Vizier has first been a tool for control against mid range, against all the hiders and tyrants and so on. But I will mention it in mid range as well, and I'll try to actually think why it's there nowadays as well. Just as if it's something that also I should have a closer look at, even though the second part of this spell doesn't really do anything, but it's kind of like gainsay, and it might be enough to justify running it because It answers Hulk and Scapegoat, but also at the same time helps to win the counter war. So it actually addresses a lot of issues at the same time. So I think because blue black and blue white both will not evaporate from the meta, I think you should probably think of or consider running at least one in the sideboard. It's such a flexible sideboard card. And we have then stuff like Arkill's Bloodfast, out of blue black for your control mirrors. In blue white, you could think of running the compass or the amulet so that you actually get to 7 faster, but I don't think it's worth it. I think in blue white you would rather dedicate those very few flag slots you might technically have to run like Jace's Defeat or extra disallow, because I think on average there will be probably more blue black X controlled X than blue whites. That means that gunning for exact mirror match will not be as important, but things could change if blue white actually in the midterm captures a larger share of the meta. A few more control tools, so Cast Out is basically for blue white against all the hazards and scarabs and Hulks to an extent, and against a variety of things actually, against planeswalkers as well. Don't think you should side out any if you're playing blue white against Temur Energy, because they board in Chandras and the like, so you'd want to have good answers to that. I mean, flexible answers. Gitta's Intervention, I think I've seen it out of this weird red white approach deck that played some of those in the sideboard. I think it's an overlooked card. It might actually shine a bit more moving up if non-blue white controller mid-ranges will pop up more, and if it's not like a gift or token stack, for instance. Hobo Gripper actually was in the sideboard of a blue-white approach deck that made the top 8, I think, at the MtG Classic event, and I really don't understand why. Okay, it gives you protection against blue, other blue decks, so that you get to do your thing. But then on the other hand, is this really the solution? Because resolving any approaches is a very hard task in blue control mirrors. But maybe it's cheap enough, and it frees up your mana at other turns, so that you know, you actually can squeeze it in. There is Spell Pierce and Dispel, but you don't want those, and then your main counters outside of so you would you can't rely on Censor, you can't really rely on Supreme Will. So then you're left with Disallow and Negate, but those are turn 3 mana, and you can't realistically justify running any copies of Dispel or Spell Pierce in blue-white. So perhaps this is a good answer, but I would have to test it out. I'm a bit reluctant and kind of distrustful about like that choice, but maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's how you fix that matchup. Delta Ruin showing up not only in blue-white's approach, but also in blue-black approach. Actually, it first appeared in blue-black for the mirror to get rid of the Search for a Scan, and that's its primary use. Occasionally, you can get rid of Brahmana Ruins, but that's a secondary thing. So it's mainly for the search, and blue-white adopted like a and even some lists run a third copy in the sideboard of the search. I'm not sure how many you can afford to run in blue-white, because well, it's colorless land after all, and then you have all those cyclers and etc. You have to run at least one in blue-white, I imagine. Yeah, but then between that and Hypno, the Milling Desert, mana could be awkward at times, so I would be careful. Seems like nobody's running actually Scavenger Grounds, so that's kind of interesting. I suppose it's a little bit too slow for the purpose, which is fizzle the abilities from the Scarab God and the Hulk. Maybe it's a bit too slow, and getting rid of the search is more important. But then again, they still get one activation out of it, so I don't know. Maybe you have to still run two. I would want to try a mix, maybe, especially since the gift deck, which doesn't care about like the filter ruin, for example, might actually pick up a little bit, because I think it did win that classic event. So yeah, and that's a real deck that that people overlook. Hypno is for the mirror mainly, for blue-white mirrors, but I've seen it, I think, even in blue-black, and I've seen some blue-white lists, including the one that went to the semifinals at the US Nationals. I've seen it as a 4-off in the main, which is a bit crazy to me, but I suppose you can do that. And from what I've heard, blue-white and blue-black might often come down to milling and that ability, and I suppose you want to run like 4, so that you know, it's not just once that you can use that, so that you give yourself an ability to do this couple of times, which might actually just seal the deal sometimes, especially game 1. I think instead of running 4 of these, I would rather play 2 of those and a couple of blue cycle deserts. That gives me a bit more value, and then I don't take too much damage off of this land when I need colored mana. Then you have Bontus Last Reckoning that I've seen as a one-off in the main, and then one extra copy in the sideboard in Christian Skull Canal list. I believe he went like top 12 at US Nationals with blue-black control. Card that a lot of blue-black lists don't actually feature. Maybe you don't really need that kind of stuff, but then again, with a bunch of, you know, tokens decks and gifts decks, the major game plan of blue-black is not so feasible, so you actually have to have occasionally stuff like this. Now onto mid-range tools. So I've seen Angel Sanctions in token and gift decks, and some other white mid-ranges. Then same for Ixalan's Bidding. It wasn't in tokens or gift decks, again in the prison style non-blue approach decks, I think. Confiscation Coup is for a teamer to get rid of the Scarab God. But it could have other uses as well, taking hazards, and because his teamer has option to play this, kind of reluctant to play Kefnet and blue-whites, though most lists don't play Kefnet, and then I suppose teamers still don't would never board that in that matchup. But then again, soon I'll be shifting very likely for Verso onto Marta vehicles and give the blue-white to the teammates, and then That means that I'll have to keep that in mind more often. But maybe it's just too slow in that matchup. But then again, your typical Mardu right now runs Hazards, so yeah. Supreme Will is a tech card, which I want to discuss in this tape, just because um, it's a tech card for Teamwork Energy actually. So you have the ability to actually counter something or dig for some action for some heavy hitters. This is why I feature this here, and yeah, it's a very nice tool, I should say. The Reflexible Essence Scatter. Previously, I think in Teamer only featured in the sideboard. Now it's become a staple to see a couple of those in the main decks in Teamer. Then there is Spell Pierce, which is again in all kinds of mid ranges and mid down decks right now. But don't think about this in actual control decks. It's not for you, because while it's good against you, it's actually inefficient for you because of how narrow this card is, and because you can't run everything, and you would much rather have more hard counters for control mirrors. River's Rebuke actually really surprised me. I was actually really glad to see that on camera during the stream of Fuse National. So this is basically Timor's or blue mid-range answer against gift or token decks. You basically bounce everything. You bounce all the cast outs, you bounce all the tokens, all the actual creatures, all the stockpiles, all the planeswalkers, and everything. That's really cool. I mean, it costs 6, but with Servants of Conduit, it's actually very feasible. I love it. So Vizier now is a thing actually in the sideboards, not just in blue-black, but also in Timor. I'm having a hard time like picturing exactly why. I suppose it's for the mirror, so that you get to copy a bunch of things. But then again, at least like one obvious thing that comes to mind to answer the question why is probably to copy their Hulks and their Scarabs. That might be a thing. Just overall a nice utility that's pretty flexible. Appetite in there just because of all those cast outs, search, first kinda what else, stockpiles and so forth, all the unlightened processions. So there are enough of targets nowadays actually. And no, can you actually get rid of confiscation? Cool. Let's rewind a little bit. No, it's a sorcery. It's not actually a mind control, exact mind control. Cartouche is just a thing for black beatdown decks against mono reds, which actually lost a lot of ground in the format right now. But yeah, it's a tech card, especially for Sulta Energy, for example, or for 4-color energy. It's a really big trump in those matchups. Bestiary came back to Timor. Normally, it's been a staple in the past season in constructed in black-green energy or black-green mid-range. Now it's found its place in Timor lists. It's actually really cool because how do you actually grind out a lot of the control and wicked mid-range matchups like tokens or gifts? Well, you just draw a bunch of cards, and you technically in your 75 have answers to everything. So this is how. One of the misses is a good thing to have in Timber in the sideboard, either this 5-mana one or the X blue-green one. I don't have enough of experience, and I haven't played Teamer thing pretty much at all, so I can't say which one is better. I guess if the game goes really long, then the blue-green Nissa is actually better, because you're actually more worried about gifts or tokens matchup. Vacation is a thing out of that we could Red approach prison style deck, because it doesn't run blue, so it doesn't have access to search for Escanta, so you have to grind your opponent somehow, even though it's 6 mana, but it kind of synergizes pretty well with approach. Things it's still a pretty niche deck. Not sure exactly where side. I think it was top 16 of the MtG Classic. I think that's where I found the list. But yeah, it's a sweet card, and 2-color deck, I suppose. It could be cool, and then to red, you have a lot of ways to actually stave off any aggressive for beatdown decks, and then if you ever resolve this against control,